Ladies and gentlemen, Khazan, the first Berserker, it's an absolute banger. So I'm here today to give you all the tips and tricks to make sure your gameplay experience goes as smooth as possible. And consider hitting that like button and subscribing to keep up to date on all the upcoming games you're not going to want to miss. So there's a few things I want to mention before we get into the combat tips that make this game very accessible to everyone. So if you find yourself having a hard time, the first thing is the easy mode availability that unlocks after defeating the first boss. So if you ever find you're getting your ass beat for a little longer than we'd like to admit, that is something that can be toggled on and off at any time. The second thing I'd like to touch on is there are spirit summons available at every main boss, so combining these two things together, if need be, will almost guarantee you the kill. And then you can go ahead and bring your difficulty back up until you run into your next brick wall. I know a lot of people out there probably aren't trying to hear this, but it is an amazing game, and I think that the more people I get to experience it is just an overall win for everybody out there. Moving into the combat, and what you need to pick up right off the bat to get your gameplay on point is first the brutal attack execution, and this is found in the common tree. This is simply going to allow you to do big damage on the enemy once you break his posture. I have to point this out because it personally took me way longer than I'd like to admit to figure this out. While we're on the subject of staggering enemies, you always want to find a solid rotation of abilities you can consistently get off right before this little indicator on the enemy's chest goes away. You always want to pump out as much damage as possible while he's in this staggered phase, with having your execution ability being the last thing you do to finish off that combo. Since we're in the common part of the skill tree, there's a few more passive skills you're going to want to keep your eye on before moving into the big bang abilities. And those are Spirit Extraction, allowing you to gain 1 spirit when interacting with Lacrima, and this usually comes in the form of corpses laying on the floor that you can absorb. It's always a good thing to get a free spirit charge out of that interaction. We also have Enduring Spirit, Indomitable Spirit, and Berserk Spirit. Honestly, this entire cluster of nodes is like the bee's knees, and it's going to be well worth the points invested. You'll be able to gain spirit through attacking your enemy, you gain additional spirit from simply parrying the enemy, and from just taking damage. Now, I do want to point out the middle node does give you spirit if you perfect dodge, but from my experience so far in the game, I tend not to use this dodge as much as I do everything else, so I personally don't recommend this one. But if your playstyle is screaming something different, then it's probably worthwhile picking up for you. One more thing I gotta mention here is the Reflect, and here's my take on it. It's always good to have and to practice with, but I personally can't seem to land these things consistently, so it's definitely going to be a game changer for those of you that can master this thing. I'm just not one of them, but I do think it's good to have in our arsenal no matter what. All right, moving on to the good stuff. We're talking the most crucial skills you need for each of the 3 weapon types. Let's start with the dual wield weapons. So looking at the guard selection first, because I think this is the most universal tree for all the weapon sets throughout the game. So whatever points we put here, it's safe for you to carry that over into the other weapon types as well, as this tree is just very important for your success in the game. First, grab blowback. This allows you to deal damage to enemies when performing a successful parry. This is a very welcome reward to any build. Next, you're going to want to grab Ironclad, and this allows you to parry more frequently because you consume less stamina when doing so. Then we want to look into Blowback Vengeance, going down the tree a little bit more, rewarding you even further by delivering a swift counter-strike. We could go a little bit further in this tree because it's just that good, but then we're just having too much fun here. And there's no fun to be had here. These are the most crucial, needed skills only. This is not the time to have fun. Now, the most broken early game abilities lie in the Potent Blow tree, and the skills that we're looking at are Gale and Gale Scar. This allows you to hold and charge your Potent Blow attack and inflict the enemy with a bleed status effect. What makes this so powerful is the vigor stacks you're able to accumulate as you attack your enemy, allowing you to do increased damage with the more stacks you have on that target. But with its upgrade, we now have options, because this allows us to make the enemy explode for some pretty big damage depending on how many stacks of vigor you have when you set this thing off on the target. So it's really nice because on bosses you could choose to ride this damage buff out for a little longer, or if you're versing a smaller enemy or a mini boss, you can get them to 10 stacks of this vigor and then pop off for some big upfront damage. Also, it needs to be mentioned that this can stun lock enemies, which by itself is absolutely amazing, but on top of that, it even depletes the enemy stamina bar like it's going out of style, so a very well-rounded ability to pick up right away. The Outrage skill will also be very useful, allowing us to pump out some very high damage while in a sprint, and I find it ends up one-shotting a lot of the enemies that you come across while you're all out and about. Then we bundle this all together with our Spirit Spender skill, Ruthless. This unleashes a massive burst of damage into the enemy, and with the points we put into the common tree gaining all this passive spirit, we're certainly not going to be on any short supply of that. And if I was to mention one more thing for all my dodgy spammers out there, if that's your playstyle, grab yourself Fleet-footed, and this is just going to be reducing the stamina of your dodge, and you're going gonna have a hell of a good time with that. Moving on to the Greatsword, and this is what I'm personally maining and fell in love with in this game. By the way, we're streaming the entire playthrough every Tuesday, Thursday, and over the weekend, so stop by if you can. The only thing I would add on the guard side of things here is Armor Breaker, but to be honest, it's still on the other tree. It's just named something different. That's kind of how it goes. But you'd also want to grab its upgrade, Heart Piercer, as this gives us a swift attack right after a perfect parry. It's a great way to stay on the offensive, dealing damage while still having a defensive mindset. Now, if you're going with the Greatsword, you should always be having charged attacks in your mind at all times. So that's what we're going to be focusing on from the start. Grab yourself Savage Momentum, allowing you to charge even your base swift attacks. We also want Manifest Power to give us a bit more reach with our charged heavies. Next thing we're going to be looking at is Mortal Blow. It's not the best thing by itself, but let me stress this. Once combined with Bloodshed, it turns into one of the best AoE cleave abilities in the entire game as far as I'm concerned. You can gather a bunch of enemies up and unleash this thing to clear out entire groups with one swing. The Spirit Spender I recommend is Phantom Knight's Veil. This is a big damage jump attack that releases 3 phantoms that also do damage. But the kicker here is it also gives you a buff, decreasing the amount of stamina you use. So a solid combo to put together is to let out a full rotation with all your abilities until you deplete your entire stamina bar, then follow up with this ability because it doesn't take stamina to use, it takes spirit, and because of the buff, you could then let your stamina recharge as you're going to be able to sustain that next bar of stamina without really having to think about it. It's a hell of a lot of fun. One more to throw in there for you guys, which is just some quality of life, is Helmbreaker. This is a fantastic way to close large gaps between you and the enemy and get you straight into combat. I use this thing on like every single mob to start off my combos, and half the time it kills them right away. Moving on, let's talk spears. And in my opinion, the spear is going to be the overall best, most overpowered weapon, and what will make your playthrough as smooth as possible if you're looking for that. And here's why. The first skill we're going to grab is Moonlight, and we base everything we do around Moonlight stance. So the last strike of our regular light attack combo will put us in this Moonlight stance, and this is going to give us the bonus of having additional images come out and do even more damage to both health and the enemy stagger bar. This effect is going to last for 15 seconds, which means we can pretty much effortlessly stay in Moonlight stance forever without having to think about it, and it gives us a ton of free damage. We also want Moonlight stance vitality, increasing our stamina recovery rate while in that stance. And again, we're always in that stance. Next up, we need to go grab 0 Point, which adds additional strikes to your base attacks. And you could chain this into a final swift attack, or if you press your heavy attack button, it's going to chain into Shadow Reveal. Now make sure you also take 0 Point Fortress just to increase the damage of 0 Point itself, and we can start talking about Shadow Reveal. Now this ability is a quick strike that positions you behind the target. And what makes this insane is you can have a rotation that starts off with a potent blow that goes right into 0 Point, blasting the enemy with consecutive stabs, then combine that with Shadow Reveal, dealing massive damage, pretty much teleporting behind the enemy, and you can continue this cycle for the longest time because we're in Moonlight stance. With that stamina recovery we spoke about at the top. But wait, there's more. This also increases the damage that your images do. I mean, I don't really need to continue here, it's just absolutely nuts. The last thing we need to pick up just for the finishing touches of becoming an absolute god is Phantom Heatwave. And this is making you essentially invulnerable while it's up. Whatever attacks is sent your way, it of course reflects that damage back at the enemy. And if that doesn't blow your socks off already, it also buffs the damage of your Moonlight images for an additional 30 seconds in case the rest of the build wasn't bonkers enough. And please keep in mind, all of this is happening with like only 4 skills allocated into your skill tree. And this is why if you're looking to dip your toe into this game and you're not used to this whole Souls-like genre, this is going to be your best bet. Last few things I want to mention before we wrap up is weapon scaling. Our dual wield weapons scale with willpower and strength. The Greatsword scales with strength and proficiency, while the spear scales with proficiency and willpower, with the first stat being the main stat of each weapon. Since we're talking about stats, the one stat I need to mention is endurance. Do not sleep on this stat in this game. It has been one of the most important stats compared to how I usually treated stamina in other titles. This will literally make or break your experience if you don't sink enough points into this. I can't stress this enough. Your endurance stat and gear will be vital to your success. Also, something I'm extremely happy to see, and I give this game just a lot of praise for, is the fact that all the main bosses, after you kill them, are still able to be farmed. Yes, there is a target dummy area, and that's fantastic as well. But if you're looking to practice, you may as well go practice on these bosses, because not only are you going to gain the benefit of honing your skills with learning your offensive combos and abilities, but while you're doing that, you're still going to be gaining additional skill points to try out different abilities. Your character is still going to be progressing with your base stats because we're gaining more lacrima as we do this, but on top of all of that, each boss has its own loot pool, and these sets are extremely powerful. So by simply going to practice on a boss, you're getting all these additional layers of power from leveling, new gear sets, more skill points, and it's an incredible way to prep yourself on what's to come in this game. But leave any questions or comments you may have down below, and if you're looking for something else to do, feel free to check out some of these playthroughs coming up on your screen next. Toodles!